Welcome to Blue Glasses Math. In this podcast, we will explore how our self-perception as math teachers and learners influences our approach to life. Whether you identify as a math enthusiast or not, this podcast is for you. Are you a teacher, a parent, a school administrator, or a student? Join me as we shift our perspective on what it means to be a math person. Let's take a look. Well, good afternoon, Ron Martiello. I'm so happy to have you here on Blue Glasses Math. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Pam. Thanks for having me on. Fellow podcaster, how you doing?
Right? I know. I'm thrilled that you listened to my podcast and then reached out to me. It's like one of the most thrilling feelings when you get an email saying, "Hey, I listened to your podcast. You want to talk?" Like,
my
yes!
word. Yes, it's like, yes, somebody's listening.
Yes. 100%. Other than my mom, who doesn't actually even understand what podcast. She's like, "What time is it on?" I'm like, "It's not a time, Mom."
Oh, my word. My dad keeps telling me, he's like, "I want to do a podcast." I'm like, well, it takes a long time. I said, I do about 4 hours of work on some of these podcasts. It's a lot of time and effort, but it's fun. He's like, 4 hours? Just talk.
It's all the other stuff that is required around.
Right.
That's really funny. Well, he probably has all the time in the world. Is he retired? I don't know.
He is retired, but he needs people, people who can just come onto the podcast and talk. They have people behind the scenes. So you and I we're from the we make it from scratch.
Right? I know. We're so techie. I'm so proud of us. All right. Well, the reason why we're on this podcast together is because we have some type of math story that weaves our world together. So how about we start with the way I start with all of my guests is tell me, the audience, about your math story.
My word. So it's like a love relationship with math. It started off in Catholic school in Northeast Philadelphia where, we played round the world. It was always round the world. And so I was pretty good with my math facts. My mom had the purple sheet, the sheet with the purple numbers and purple letters.
Oh yeah.
I used to run
the ditto?
Yes, the ditto sheets. And so at the kitchen table, man, she made sure I knew my math facts. I got into school and my teachers, the stickers were really a big deal. I mean, the Smurf stickers.
Yes, the puffy ones.
The puffy ones. It did. Oh man, Smurfs. It was like I had the tie full of the Smurfs, and I made sure when they fell off, I made sure I put tape back on them so that they would still stick to my tie. But there came a point where it was like, I wasn't kind of like in the math class I normally was. I got through probably about fourth and fifth grade, and it was like, why are my friends going to that class over there? So it ended up where the math got a little tougher, and the expectations weren't that high. And so I kind of trugged through, and I'm like, I guess math is just okay. And then in high school, I started loving math again. I did well in geometry, did well in trigonometry. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go to Millersville University in Pennsylvania here, and I'm going to be a math major. And they put me in college algebra.
Interesting.
After the placement test. And I'm like, what's college algebra? I'm supposed to be in calculus. And sure enough, like, algebra was tough.
So
go ahead.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
So you went through your high school, you did the geometry, the trig. You probably did some algebra in there.
Oh yeah, algebra 1 and 2.
Algebra 1. And then the college algebra was based on this placement test that you took. Was it a 4-credit class? Because I've talked to people before where it's like you have to take this math class, but you get no credit even though you still have to pay for it.
It wasn't even a 100 level class. You're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. And I'll come back to that part of the story in a little bit, but one of the things that it kind of crushed me, and eventually, I couldn't dig myself out. Not only with that, they put me in a computer programming class that had to do a lot of logic and things. I had never touched a computer in my life. I'm a 90s kid. We didn't grow up with computers in our homes. And so, it just kind of like knocked me down. And a friend of mine said, Ron, if you want to teach, why don't you think elementary school? And so I switched my major to elementary ed, and I found my space. I did all my work. I had one class in math, which I did okay on. But I see you shaking your head.
Yeah,
one class to teach math. And then got my job as a first grade teacher in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. And I loved it. I loved the kids. I spent 8 years in a first grade classroom and got the bug for administration, became an assistant principal, loved it, got a job as a principal real fast. I spent 8 years in the district I am now and wanted to spend a little more time with my kids. I wanted to coach my own kids in baseball and softball and soccer. My heartstrings were pulling, so I asked my district if they could put me back in the classroom, and they did. Taught third grade for 3 years, reinvented myself, started figuring out this math stuff, like, oh, wait a minute. This is a lot different than when I started being a principal. And I started reinventing myself. I went on Twitter, started talking to people online who'd written books and things. And somebody said, you know what, Ron, I think this math coach thing might be something for you. So here I am 6 years later as a math coach. And just this is where I find myself. And I find that love for math again. Because it's like once I figured out like how to really teach it, and I'm still learning. I'm still learning every day, just like I'm sure you are.
100%. Yeah.
You find new things every day with every conversation. So that's where I am.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So you mentioned you had this like up down. It's funny because I had done something I've done, and for people who are listening to this, especially for anybody who's an admin or a coach or some type of math leader, I've done this activity with teachers where I ask them to tell me their math story, but to illustrate it as a graph. And I don't tell them what type of graph. I just tell them illustrate it as a graph. And it's interesting. Most people do a line graph, which is what reminded me when you said it was sort of an up down. But other people do things like pictographs or I don't know that I had any circle graphs or pie charts or anything like that. But anyway, my question is like if we were picturing your math story as this sort of like you started at that high flyer with those proud stickers on your tie, it's a badge of honor, and then all of a sudden you are, help me make sure that I'm saying this right. You were sort of like left in that classroom. The other kids were leaving to go somewhere else, or was it the other way around?
So I'll say this. It was more of like, so we had like 3 sections of the grade level. And so I was in a different section than my peers that I had been with for the past 4 years.
Got it.
And I couldn't understand why. And I could tell you there's spots in my early education where I could tell you that I could see the like different patterns, and I was reasoning through things, and my reasoning might not have been totally sound, but I was seeing things past the numbers, and I don't think my teachers really could understand what I was saying. I'll give you a perfect example. Sister O'Brien, first grade classroom. I'm writing my facts with 10. So 0 plus 10 equals 10. 1 plus 9 equals 10.
Okay.
I'm sitting there and I'm like, why am I writing these out like this? I'm like 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, equal. And then like not 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 plus, and then 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I said, sister, look at this. I don't have to write these out the way in order. I found the pattern. No, Ronald. And Sister O'Brien, bless her heart, she was doing the best she can. She had 30 kids in that classroom. They were all 6 years old, and she was doing she's like, but that's the way math was. Like, you got to do it in order, and you got to write it one at a time because I want you to remember it. I said, but I know it.
Right.
Have you ever had that?
Oh, 100%. It's actually ironic because I was looking at, I'm coaching teachers too right now, and I was looking at something for my third grade teachers that I'm working with. And I was thinking about looking at the products of 9, the products of 9, right? And having them have the students look at the products of 9 and how they go from, 18 to 27. And it's a similar pattern, right? The 10s go up and the 1s go down or ascend and descend, if I'm using proper vocabulary. Third graders are going to say the 1s are going up and the 10s are going up and the 1s are going down. Anyway, but how interesting it is that Sister O'Brien, first of all, when you're in first grade, just for context, you're 5, 6 years old. Right?
Yes.
And
back in 1981.
Right. And you're old enough now to have teenagers and have been a principal and a coach. So we don't need to do the math on what your current age is, but it was a long time ago. Well, actually, you just said the year, so we can do the math on that. But, it's these visceral memories that stand in our hearts, right? And that you're right, not Sister O'Brien's fault by any means.
No.
because that was what she knew. She, with her best intentions, saying, "No, Ronald, you have to do it my way, this way. The way, maybe it's not my way, but it's the way that we do it."
Yeah, exactly. And she always called me Ronald.
Ronald.
The nuns always called me Ronald. It's so funny. But yeah, I mean, I felt myself like wanting to think more deeply about math. And the other misconception was like, if you're talking, you're cheating. You know, you sat in that desk and that square that you saw, that flat surface you saw every single day. That's where math happened. It happened there, or it happened at the board with the teacher doing it, and then I replicated it. And do not look to the left or look to the right. Don't you dare say a word, because then you're cheating. And we know that math is so much more than that.
Yes. So when did your perspective? So you mentioned you became an elementary school teacher, first grade, then third grade. How did your perspective shift about math? Because you said you had that one math class, right? The pre-service teachers, like classic one math class, and maybe your professor's focusing on all the grades, but probably not possible in one semester or one. It was probably one semester course, I'm assuming. And then you get thrown into maybe first grade or kindergarten or whatever grade you get thrown into. And now you have to kind of learn on your own, I think, sometimes.
I'll say there was one professional development that started opening my eyes a little bit more to what math could be. And you know, how to model mathematics and how to take what's in the numbers and kind of show it visually. And at that point in my career, I was very big on making learning visible and making sure that students could explain what they were doing. I still hadn't reached that point. And this is after being a principal. I mean, this was I was in my 40s when I started discovering these things. And so it wasn't like early on I had to reinvent myself. But the thing was, I knew coming out of administration and observing so many wonderful teachers who had been teaching in the building I was in, having conversations with them, and then just knowing like what to ask, who to talk to, and just having that courage to do that. So when this professional development happened, I started looking into, again, Twitter was on the rise, and we had so many teachers and educators on Twitter that were just developing these communities. I started getting more ideas and started bringing back to my colleagues, and they were like, let's do it. And again, I had a great group of third grade, of my third grade team, and I'm a crazy idea guy. I'll bring a crazy idea, like, hey, I got a crazy idea. And they're like, let's start a
podcast. Crazy idea.
Yeah. So, and then all of a sudden, like the whole grade level is like, okay, it's not just about the numbers. We're going to model the mathematics. We're going to use different strategies. We're going to use different models. Let's try a bar model. Let's try an open number line. Let's try, all these different strategies to show their thinking. When you start that energy happening, like, it's amazing. We all just kind of fed off each other. We checked our understanding too. So I think that between that professional development and that team that kind of nurtured my crazy ideas and started like giving me some ideas back, it was awesome.
So it's interesting because I just heard, I was just listening in on a webinar with Mike Flynn, who is starting a new community, and amazing. And so he used the word, I think it was the term was a collective agency or collective, I think it was collective agency.
Efficacy?
Collective efficacy. Thank you. Yes. Collective efficacy. Okay, so yeah.
That's my jam.
So it sounds like collective efficacy is exactly what was happening. So let's talk about that a little bit. So it was your jam.
So I'll tell you right now, as a principal, I was taught how to kind of create goal plans. And one of the things that I really loved about being a principal, and I really did love being a principal, was moving a group of people together and having a goal, and not just a metric, not just a number, but a goal. Like, what are we going to do to help students with their learning? And as I grew with my staff as a young principal, with some very veteran teachers who, by the way, taught my wife. They were
wow.
Oh yeah. We came together over time and were able to move things forward. Things like making sure we're using a common language when it comes to math, or any topic. Like, we need to make sure we're having a common language of instruction and learning. We committed to that. We also would commit to things like making sure that we're all, we're all staying in our lanes. Like, what do you teach? And having those vertical meetings. And what am I responsible for? What are you responsible for? And making sure that we had that coherent instruction. So when you talk about collective efficacy, when you do those things and you all make a commitment to it, there should be a result on the other side. And I was always a big believer in, like, if you're going to, there should be a cause and effect. If I do this, then we hope this is going to happen. If it doesn't happen, you know what? We know this doesn't work, or we could have tweaked some things a little better. Can we try another year? That's another big thing. It's like, you can't have collective efficacy if it's like you're 1 year and done.
Yeah, 100%.
So now that I'm a learning coach, like, I could see it. I could see where, that energy, you start creating some energy around things. And one of the things I love to do is like creating some energy around like a strand of standards.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite strands of standards is that has to do with like the situation types, with like add to, take away, and put together, take apart. Then you have like, and then comparisons, and then equal groups and arrays, and then that multiplicative comparison up there in 4th grade.
Yes.
And then, when we start talking about situations and we're all using that same language from kindergarten all the way up through, 4th grade, but then 5th grade and 6th grade see those connections, and you start having those conversations, you're all talking the same language, and like, okay, let's all do this and make sure we're all rowing in the same direction. And then just seeing the results of that over time, it's amazing.
It sounds like it has, all the components of really strong growth, right? You're not alone on an island. You're with other colleagues who are bought into the same goal, right? And I love what you said about, like, it doesn't, at the end you hope to have this end goal, but it doesn't mean that it's a quote unquote failure if that goal is not met by XYZ time. It's an opportunity to reflect and think, do we need more time? Which most of the time, the answer is yes, right? Because people like you and I'm thinking about math all day long, but the teachers that I work with are thinking about everything else and math.
Yes. And gosh, we're competing for some time with some really other great educators in language arts or science or social studies, and not just that, but just like behavior systems and morning meetings and just all the other things. So when you do create goals like this, you really, trying to tackle math altogether is very difficult. But when you can attend to like one strand, because math is a coherent system, and if we could find a strand that we could all row together on, and actually that's a high leverage standard there, probably because the situation types really help in a lot of different ways for making sense of problems and helping kids persevere, and
yes,
reasoning abstractly and quantitatively. It's all that good stuff. When we're all talking the same language, even if we don't get the number results, but we can see our kids talking it from year to year. Like, I can't wait for the fall, because the fall that's the litmus test. That's the one where you're like, okay, I'm going to listen for teachers. Do they hear it? Like, oh, my kids are talking about situation types. My kids are talking about add to, take away, or my kids applied the put together with adding fractions. We had a problem with adding fractions, and they were putting together and taking apart. And they were talking about it. So it's again, that's the efficacy. That's the result I do love. Don't get me wrong. We definitely want to have our achievement be as best as it can be, but it's a process, and we have to be patient.
Yeah. No, it's like the patient problem solving that we want from our students. We have patient problem solving on our end as professionals, as professional learners. Yeah. Okay, cool. So what else was I going to ask you? I think give me the idea that you went from the I call them the level 0 algebra 1 or whatever algebra classes in college. Now you're full circle to a math coach. Is there a particular moment in your career where you're like, yeah, this is what I want to do, other than you want to, yeah, that's all.
I would say that I'm a lucky guy. I'm a lucky person. I have had such a great career. Now my career has been like this big squiggly line, but I have been in I have loved every job I've had. I've loved being a first grade teacher, loved being an assistant principal, learned so much there, loved being a principal. I really did. it broke my heart to leave, but I knew what I was going toward. But again, I'm lucky to also be in a district that after 3 years in third grade, and they saw the good things I was doing and asked me to do some more. So I have loved every bit. And right now, I'm doing this podcast, and you're doing the
Yeah.
podcast. But we also I also
Yes, you
wrote
wrote
a
a
book
book.
with a friend.
Minor details. So tell us the title of
That's
the book.
okay.
Tell us the title of the book.
So if I can, I'll just go.
Of course.
Here
Yeah,
it
please
is.
do, because I don't have a
Uh,
copy of it yet.
that's all right. Conquering Math Myths with Universal Design. I'm sorry, it's blurry.
No, it's
But
good.
I co-authored this with my friend and colleague, Dr. Jenna Rufo. And what we did was, it was shortly after COVID, and I was, diving deeply into the Common Core, the shifts in the core, the mathematical practices. And then I'm also getting this training from my district on Universal Design for Learning. And I'm like, there's so many connections here. Why are we making this separate? So I called my friend. I said, "Hey, I have an idea." I said, "I'm taking this training on Universal Design for Learning, and I think there are a lot of connections here. I think we need to take a look at this." And she had already written 2 books. She's a Harvard graduate. If you're going to write a book, find somebody who's written a couple
Yeah.
and graduated from Harvard.
Good idea. Smart.
And she's like, "Let's do it." So we were off and running. And so the biggest thing about it was, okay, can we conquer these myths? Can we provide, like, what's the math? Like, how is the math built? How do we design math in the system that it is, so that we could be responsive for our students? So let's create some really good goals and then find ways to be responsive. And
So,
then,
can I
yeah,
interrupt you for a second? So, can you, for the listeners who maybe don't understand or know what Universal Design for Learning is, maybe
got
in
it.
like a sentence or two,
So you
give us a
got it.
quick, I know it's hard, but
So the Universal Design for Learning is a framework that was put out by the CAST organization. And so it is a way to make learning more accessible for all learners. And when we say all, we mean all learners. So our students who are later in their learning, as well as early in their learning, neurodiverse, like everyone. So if you think about universal design, there's the story of the curb cuts. So you have your sidewalks
yeah.
that have the curb cuts,
Yes.
and they were designed. Who are they designed for?
People who are in wheelchairs.
Right, but who do they
Yes.
benefit?
Everybody.
Everybody. They
Especially my
benefit.
mom who's shuffling along now, right?
Yes, your mom, the mom with the baby carriage, the roller skaters, the kids on bikes,
Yes. The Amazon driver
everybody.
who's got a cart in New York City.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that curb cut is a metaphor. It's
Love
actually a
that.
real story, and there are multiple stories about it. There's also one with, like, pilots. Like, pilots, fighter pilots can only be a certain height. Well, now they've adjusted the seats. You make the seats adjustable, more people can fly planes. But if you think about it, the architects or the original universal design said, what if we did this proactively? Instead of, like, retrofitting everything, what if we did it proactively? And again, I go back to, like, the 5 practices with
Yeah.
Peg Stein and Peg Smith and Mary Kay Stein.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Like, they talk about that, like anticipating where the barriers might be.
Yes.
You have a goal. What are the
Yeah.
barriers?
Yeah.
Now, and then what are the options? So in universal design, we provide options for kids. And if a kiddo has a math toolkit and they're using, they have their own math toolkit, and they have, like, if they're doing base 10, like base 10 blocks and an open number line and maybe a chart for hundreds, tens, and ones, like, all of those tools are options for them to show their learning, to give them access, to support them through their learning, and also to provide agency. Like, this is how I did it. So,
100%.
yeah. So that's the short version. And again, I brought more of the math to the table. My colleague, Dr. Jenna Rufo, she brought the universal design piece to the table. But like I said, this is where I am in May 20th, 2025. Like, I'm still learning. And so I can't wait to dive even further into universal design, as well as, like, all this other math stuff.
Well, on the topic of writing a book, I heard Kevin Dykema on your podcast. I was listening to it this morning doing my homework, and he even said, because he wrote a book called Productive Math Struggle. He co-authored it with...
Yes.
Yes, he co-authored it also. And he said, and I've heard this 2 or 3 times this week, is that I wrote the book, but now I think I've heard Peter Lilladell say this about building thinking classrooms, is there's so much more, right? There's so much more that I want to... A book is so... It can be finite, but then it's the second edition, the third edition, right? Because we're always learning. We're always learning. And I think that's a true strength for people to admit that we're never done.
And you know what? People could see through you. I mean, I know a whole bunch of stuff, but someone's going to ask me a question and I won't have an answer for it. So if I don't come off as like being a learner, like, and being vulnerable in that way, you know, then all of a sudden, like, your street credit kind of goes down.
Yeah.
So you want to always be open to that new idea. And again, society's going to change, technology's going to change, and we have to kind of move with it. But right now, you know, I'm happy being a learner, and like, this is how I show my learning, through podcasts and now with the book.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on the book. That's exciting. Now I need to order it, and I will put the link to the book in the show notes as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, so let's wrap up by I have this one final question that I ask, and the question is, if you could give an educator who is looking for advice, a recommendation on what lens or what perspective they should bring to the math classroom in 1 or 2 sentences.
Keep an open mind. Ask questions. Be curious. You know, everybody comes to the table with something, and sometimes you have to be open to what they're bringing to the table, because it very well could change you and improve the way, you know, improve the person that you are.
I'm Pam Brett. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Blue Glasses Math. Please follow me wherever you get your podcasts, and follow along on the conversation on Instagram. And remember, being a math person is all just a matter of perspective.